as term or quorum. Number 1, discussion on upcoming updates to intersections along U.S. Business Highway 2. We have 2 representatives from Minnesota DOT.
Yeah.
Introduce yourself. Is it Matt?
It's Matt, yep.
Okay. I'm not sure.
Yep, Michelle Rugnert, I'm the District Traffic Engineer from MnDOT.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Matt Upgren. For those of you that I haven't met, I actually don't think I've been here yet. So Matt Upgren, I work at MnDOT District 2 out of Bemidji. Just wanted to come here tonight to let you guys know about a project that we have coming up on the 2 business on the through that part of town. It's a signal replacement project. So in your packet, I believe there is an overview shot of one of the intersections under question. In addition to that intersection, we're looking at 4th Street and 2nd Street over by Cabela's on Demers, or 2B there. So the overview photo you have of 2nd Avenue and 2B, it's come up as a candidate for a potential roundabout. Before we go any further into our own analysis, we want to make sure you guys know what we're considering, and ultimately we're looking for feedback from you guys, and we want to gauge your thoughts on a roundabout at that location at 2nd Avenue. As of now, it's slated for 2023 construction, the replacement of the signals at these 3 intersections. So just want to get way out ahead of it. Start the conversation with you guys and determine the local support and make a decision based off that. So this is separate, as of now, this is separate from the Highway 220 discussion.
So all these signals they were all installed 1989, 90, 91, all, and they are due to be replaced. They're on their 30-year cycle. So as part of any signal, we're not just out searching for roundabout locations, but as part of any signal replacement project, we are required to do an intersection control evaluation and to determine the proper control, whether it's replaced as a signal removed, or a roundabout option. We did determine that downtown at Cabela's and at 4th, that those were not good locations for that, so we can just write a memo saying we'll just replace as is unless somebody has some desire for something else there. But this other location isn't so cut and dry. We could open that up if that's an option for folks. If politically that isn't an option, we'll just move ahead with a replacement kind of a thing. So, there are benefits, pros and cons to both. So.
Mr. Chairman, you have something, sir?
So, thank you, Matt and Michelle, for coming. As part of the Highway 220 corridor study, there's been a lot of discussion, concerns with roundabouts, with farm equipment, farm trucks and everything in the fall. We'd have a lot of those same concerns, I think, in this intersection. Another thing is, we have had discussions about the quiet zone, and how putting a roundabout, how that may affect traffic coming from basically the south there, with traffic stacking up, would we have issues there? And then just question for you, and it hasn't even been brought up to this group yet, but Darren Lash had approached us about looking at a kind of a jurisdictional transfer where the city would actually take over Business Highway 2 and MnDOT would actually take over Demers Avenue out in front of us. And like I said, we're kind of gathering information before we bring it to this group. But so if that was the case, would the city just get that money to make those improvements in the future then? Because I think if we were to move ahead with that jurisdictional transfer, I think Darren was talking like 2021 timeframe, which would be beyond.
Yep.
So.
Yep. Darren left us with a note on that, and he said that if the jurisdictional transfer goes through, now the legs of that intersection that were trunk highway are now local, that we would basically compensate the city for those upgrades.
Right, that would be part of that whole jurisdictional transfer, and what improvements need to be made, that would be considered part of that, so.
Yeah.
Would that be a one-time reimbursement? Okay. Mr. Demers?
Thank you, Mr. President. If lights were redone there, because the north and north-south legs are local, would we be responsible for the lights on that portion, or are we, I mean, is there a share on that, or do you guys, does MnDOT do all of?
Any of the signal replacements with local legs would have local cost share.
Okay,
So 2 out of the 4.
okay. I've been a pretty big proponent of roundabouts. I think they work, especially when when geometries are skewed and things like that. I agree with Steve's analysis that, this would have to be something that would be able to take truck traffic, because it does feed, Crystal Sugar's factory. People come along there all the time, so I don't know. I know I'll get to that. So that would have to be factored in. My fear, it comes to that stacking issue, is like that south leg, and even, I just think if you're gonna make it big enough for trucks to get in, you might have to push that whole intersection south a little bit, and then all of a sudden that stacking gets even less whenever there's a train there, and I worry about, all of a sudden, the train comes, and then people get halfway into the roundabout, and then it's a cluster. That's my fear. So I fear that. Or my other concern, not fear, that's not a good word. My other concern is that I think at some point we have to consider how we're going to get either under or over those railroad tracks. I've talked about it before, central corridor type issues, and how, if we're just doing things on the other side without taking a look at what that railroad crossing looks like you said, quiet zone and any of that, I think we're doing ourselves a disservice. On the roundabout, as far as the trucks go, I think it is possible. I know Thief River Falls is doing a bunch of work on their haul routes. There's one spot, I think correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they've got like a modular housing outfit there that's going to be using these roundabouts. So if they can move houses around them, I think that can set aside a bunch of our fears about getting beat trucks and all that. And I'd hate to think that we're less progressive than Thief River Falls. I think that'd be a sad day. But like I said, that's my only real big concern is how that, if you move that south, does that hurt stacking? And there's quite a few trains that go through there. I've gone through one way and then come back the other and hit another train. So that would be my only concern.
Mayor?
If it were to come back as a signalized intersection, I know you would do a study. Would it have to come back essentially as it is, or would there be a possibility for left arrows in a couple of places?
Yep, we can look at
Okay.
what other improvements would need to be made there. If we're having issues with capacity for left turns, we definitely can.
Yeah, with the patterns as they are, it would not surprise me if the folks coming from the east roughly and headed west, that might need a left arrow, and also coming from the south might need a left arrow. But of course, you'll do your study. I'm glad to hear that at least it could have that possibility. It's not required to come back basically just in the same footprint of what it is.
And typically with any signal that gets put in, we're doing flashing yellow arrows. I don't know if people are familiar with those,
Yeah.
and that would be an option here, so.
Thank you.
Mr. Helms?
My main concern on the whole thing is the fact that it is so close to that railroad track. I do believe that would be a problem. And Mr. Demers, just to say this, they're moving a house around a roundabout. They probably got pilot cars and everything else stopping traffic so they can do that. You're not going to have that issue here. We're not going to have people out there directing traffic around this roundabout when those trucks and farm equipment and everything else going through there. I'm a believer in roundabouts myself, but and I've said it before on that 220 corridor, in the right place. In the right place they work. I don't know so much as this is the right place for it. And if we can get by with just the lights, I'd be happy with that. And then as our mayor said there, a couple turn lanes and everything would be a big plus there.
Question I have for you is a bird's eye view of it, just thinking about a roundabout, what property, I mean, if you guys even looked at it and say, okay, well, this is going to have to be size of it, we're going to have to acquire this property and this property. I mean, we're talking about the south side.
There'll likely be a right-of-way needed, shifting south. It would, the center of it would likely shift to the south into that green space area, so I don't know who owns that or who the landowners are around there now, but there would likely be some right-of-way acquisition as part of a roundabout. Impacting those landowners on the sides of it, even on the north side, most likely. I noticed it looked like there was a gas line under there where there's water lines, so it has its challenges, but.
I would guess it'd probably have to be a double wide too, right, instead of a single?
I would think it'd be a single, am I right?
Capacity wise,
I
single.
think for the flow, it would go better with a double
This is very preliminary. We actually didn't even jump into any of that at this point. My gut would say single, but it might be with all the left turning traffic.
I guess my fear is people not wanting to use a roundabout at that section would end up going back to, what is the one that goes across? What street is that? Fourth?
Central.
Or Central Avenue?
Central. Yep.
And going straight, which would end up causing more traffic at Sacred Heart. That would be, or in that area, that would be my concern as well. I mean, just creating more traffic coming back that way, bringing it around and forcing it to the other side.
There's times we almost need a traffic signal at that intersection.
Right.
Or a roundabout.
Nancy?
I'm just a little worried.
Yes.
Yeah, traffic signal at Central would be really hard for the amount of vehicles right now that travel on Central. We're at about 500 vehicles a day. It's very, very limited. So a roundabout would be, unfortunately, to match here, that would make more sense. My biggest concern is the trains, because you're not just gonna get the southbound stacking, you're gonna get it stacking on the west and eastbound as well, and it's going to be blocking other intersections. Because at 5 o'clock, the trains seem to love to show up when school starts or when it lets out, and they're getting more and more trains, and they're getting longer and longer, and I think the stacking is going to be incredible. Plus, if you look at the actual property itself and the right-of-way that's existing, you'd have to purchase right-of-way to the south, and the railroad right-of-way there is quite large. The property to the southwest already has some plans for bus garage. It's privately owned. They have other plans for that. The one to the southeast right now is fairly small. It would be quite hard to get something in there, something like a buildable space. But yet shifting it that way, the railroad right-of-way gets very, very close to MnDOT right-of-way. So trying to fit in a roundabout there, I think as well is gonna be very difficult and bring it, pretty close to the railroad tracks. So you probably wouldn't even have any stacking between the intersection and the railroad, right-of-way. So obviously I'm not against roundabouts, but this location, I just think with the railroad being as close as it is, I think is going to be quite a challenge, especially for purchasing right away from one of the property owners that might end up being a taking, which would be rather difficult. So those are just my thoughts on that. So.
Yeah.
Matt, this is just to please me a little bit. I have a question, maybe one of you can answer for me, and I've been trying to find this out, but I haven't got nobody's been able to explain it to me. What is the big deal with roundabouts versus stoplights now that the MnDOT wants to put so many roundabouts in? Are they trying to just eliminate stoplights? Because roundabouts are obviously more expensive to do than stoplights? Or what is the big factor in, you know, I'm asking if, why they want to push the roundabout so hard versus the lights?
Yeah, well, I believe it's two things, just traffic flow and reduced long-term maintenance. Am I right, Michelle? I mean, is that?
Yep, and safety, they are.
So they're proven to reduce injuries or crashes at those intersections, and maybe you can do a better job of explaining it, Michelle.
And it's not just the state, it's came from the federal highway many years ago, that anytime we go into changing the control at an intersection, we do need to look at other options than just signals, because signals aren't a safety device. They just assign right-of-way. They also have the warrants that come with them, so that you can only install one if it meets the warrants, because you're stopping people for only one car, you know, so there's an inconvenience. So they handle traffic flow all times of the day, treat every leg equally, versus a signal that can either just handle main line and stops you can stop a lot of traffic for just one car to come out, kind of a thing. And then they're safer. And then long-term maintenance, they're actually been shown to be less expensive, but that's over many years. So you're not out there servicing that signal. We come to East Grand a lot for servicing signals, so we spend a lot of time on that. We obviously have to replace them after 30 years, which is where we're at and why we're here today. So there's just the long term, but they are more expensive typically to install. So you're correct on that for sure. So they're just another device. So they're not the right tool all the time, and neither are signals. And in this case, it could be either, depending on a lot of factors. But like I said, we haven't gone into we wanted to come here first before getting into the study too far, before spending time on it. So.
Thank you.
Johnson, do you have something?
Mr. President, thank you. The mayor is absolutely right in his analogy here with this US 2 heading west, from the east heading west, to have a flashing yellow turn to go south. There's those lights, they both turn green, and I've seen it many times where the people look at the green and they turn left in front of oncoming traffic.
They don't yield.
And that's where all your sugar beet traffic comes down. There's going to be I thank God there hasn't been, but I can see where there could be a bad accident there.
Anybody else have any questions or comments they want to pass on? And is there anything else you want to ask or inquire? Or?
Well, I guess, go ahead.
No, you.
I was going to say, the purpose of being here today is just to see, should we move forward with looking into the roundabout option or not? Or is that something you guys want to look into or discuss and then get back to us? Or quite honestly, if it's a flat no, we're willing to move forward with signal replacement. So we kind of need to know where we should be putting our efforts, I guess.
That's Mr. Vedder, sorry.
For my opinion, I like roundabouts. For this intersection, if you can tell me how you're going to handle the stacking, I'd be for the roundabout. This morning, the train went by at about 5 to 8 and was done at about 5 after 8. And there was stacking on the south leg. I bet they were out to the fire station. On the north leg, if they weren't down to your house this morning, I'd be surprised. And on Business Highway, both ways, it was a long way. So if you can solve the stacking issue with the roundabout, yeah, let's go for it.
And to that point, the stacking's an issue with the signal as well. So,
I think the point is that stacking wouldn't interfere with the use of the roundabout. Is that what you're getting at for the?
Right. For those that want to go
Keep
through.
it straight.
Yep.
Yeah. So I mean.
and we would treat that as any intersection, that you don't block an intersection for a railroad. But I think that's a big learning situation for motorists to get used to. So.
Yeah, and the one thing they talked about too, and we're, kind of looking at that too, is if we did look at the quiet zone, we'd have to look at that, kind of that preemption timing between the traffic lights and the crossing arms at the railroad track, so that, you don't get traffic block there, so maybe a little more difficult if you eliminate those traffic lights there, to how do you time that so someone doesn't get caught on the tracks?
One thing with roundabouts, if we're going to do the right thing for pedestrians, typically it's a matter of pull the pedestrian crossing away from the roundabout, create a safe island between two driving lanes and go. You really think there would be room to do that, where you pull back the pedestrian crossings in that footprint?
Those are all things certainly we'd look at. I mean, I guess the dimensions and geometry of it right today, we haven't really gotten into, but pedestrian safety would be addressed for sure. I mean, in the roundabout. If it's something we felt we wanted to move forward with. And so like Michelle said, I mean, you guys have given us some really good feedback. If the consensus is a hard no, we can walk out of here today without it. If you guys want a little time to think about it, discuss it, we could certainly continue the conversation. We would want to know at the latest within 4 to 6 weeks so that we know which direction to start heading.
I guess we can go around quickly and just say, do you want to even have them look at the roundabout, yes or no? Then we'll know now tonight, because it's something that there's no sense waiting on it.
Yeah, I mean, the right-of-way questions and the geometry of it, those are things we would have to investigate still and make sure it's going to work. We haven't invested a huge amount of time and resources into that yet because we wanted to start here just to see if it's even a direction we should go or not.
Sure.
Because with the purchase of the right-of-way, it would be off on the local streets. So that's my biggest fear, is that we'd be purchasing right-of-way either on Second somewhere, which would be up to the city. And I'm very, very concerned about purchasing right-of-way that would leave one of the properties. Well, one is essentially hard to build on. It may turn the other one into not sellable. It might render that one as well, because there's a building there, a very large building, but if there's no parking or space next to it, it just becomes a building that you can't really get a lot of access to. And I'm just very concerned from a city standpoint, what type of right-of-way acquisition it's going to take and how much it's going to cost the city and what implications there are. So it would be hard to say yes or no because you don't have a design, but from the idea of it, you're not going to be able to go north with it because we already have a gas station and and a building there. So it would go to the south where the green space is, and that kind of eliminates a lot of buildable space or usable space for those properties as well. So I guess I just wanted to make sure that that was clear, because fitting the roundabout in there is going to require city funds for the right-of-way acquisition. So
Is that correct then?
Well, I would think that would actually be trunk highway.
I would too.
Because if it's for the roundabout itself, then it would be MnDOT's right of way.
Okay.
And then but we're getting back to this jurisdictional transfer question, and if that occurs,
We're going to wait on that.
Yeah, we'll hold off.
Darren has, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, one last question. Any thought of bringing that fifth leg in, the one that comes straight from the east? I know roundabouts can handle multiple in and outs, or would that be a stretch?
It's already blocked off, isn't it? No?
It's blocked off now.
But if you're-
I guess that's not something we had looked at. Not saying we wouldn't.
I didn't even know if it would be a benefit to the individuals living there. But I know roundabouts, that's one thing they're good at, is taking traffic from odd angles and incorporating it.
Slowing it down and weaving it together, yeah.
It would probably make it a lot larger in order to get the separation. But it's
Yeah.
something we can, like I said, we haven't looked into anything. We can certainly follow up on a lot of these questions soon, but today we were just, do we even go down that path? So
Guess we'll go around.
President, I'd like to see them incorporate the turn lanes in, do a little upgrading that way and upgrade the lights a little bit, and I think we'd be just fine.
I'm
Better.
for looking at the roundabout and see if it's feasible.
I'm for the turn signals, and we'd alleviate the stacking if they would help us get the 32nd Avenue Bridge.
Mr. Johnson.
Good call.
I'm all for the signals, the arrows.
I'm leaning towards the signals.
Yeah, I think signals, if for a very small investment of time and dollars, you could address the question of stacking. But I think, I don't know, I'm no expert on roundabouts, but my gut says we're going to end up with a little upgraded signal and on we go. That's just how it looks to me.
Demers.
Thank you. I guess I'm, as long as it doesn't cost us anything, I don't mind you guys studying alternatives, you know. I mean, we'd still have to say yay or nay, but, I mean, it doesn't, I'm all for looking at alternative options.
But I was leaning also. I mean, you can look at it, but I think you're going to run into issues with the property right of ways. And that's going to be one of the biggest hurdles. So, but majority of people prefer the light you know, so I guess you have your direction on that, opinion.
Do you have any issues acquiring property from a religious organization? Because I don't know if you can condemn it, can you?
Boy, that's a good question. I don't have experience with that, I guess, so,
I'm thinking there might be an issue there too.
okay.
Good point. I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
So, but I guess, I mean, now you can go ahead and look at the traffic signals and go from there.
Okay, well, we sure appreciate the feedback, you guys, and the thought put into it, so we'll go with that.
Yep.
And,
sounds
yeah, if there's any other questions or something pops into your head at any point, don't hesitate to call over and ask for one of us, and we'd be happy to talk it over or whatever, so.
Appreciate it. Thanks for coming.
Thanks,
You bet.
folks.
Thank you, guys.